Baby, you don't gotta fight so hard. I'm right here. The words were barely above a whisper. Moments before, chaos had ruled. The city's most powerful families had gathered to toast Thomas Reed's latest Empire Rise-sized triumph. And then porcelain shattered. One plate. Then another. A third. Each one exploding against marble like gunshots. Gasps rippled across the room. Heads turned toward chaos, not champagne. At the center of the storm stood Lucas Reed, 5 years old, face red and wet, body trembling with grief and fury too big for his tiny bones. He hurled a bread plate next, sending it ricocheting off a chair leg. Silverware rattled. A glass toppled. "Lucas!" Thomas Reed's voice cracked through the room like a gavel. "Enough." The Thomas Reed, real estate magnate, widower, man of power, but the child didn't hear. His small hands shook violently, tiny chest heaving. He looked less like a misbehaving boy, and more like someone drowning where everyone could see but no one understood. His mother's death 9 months ago still clung to him like a storm cloud, and grief had made a home where words had died. Whispers cut through the air like blades. That child is dangerous. He needs discipline, not excuses. Money can't buy proper parenting. Thomas's jaw tightened. The man who commanded skyscrapers and boardrooms now stood helpless before 100 judging eyes. The maitre d' froze. Security hesitated. No one moved. Except one person. Maya Williams, a 29-year-old waitress with a simple white shirt and a quiet grace born from harder places than this. Watched from near the kitchen doors. She knew how to disappear here. It had become a survival skill, but she also recognized that sound, the raw, torn from the heart cry of a child lost in pain no one helped him carry. She had heard it from her little brother after their mama died. You learn to breathe through hurt or drown in it. Lucas grabbed a salad plate and threw hard. It spun across the room and slammed into Maya's collarbone. Pain shot like lightning. Porcelain split. A jagged edge dragged across her shoulder. Warm blood blossomed beneath her shirt. She staggered. Thomas whipped toward her, voice sharp with humiliation and anger he didn't know where to put. "Are you insane? Don't get near him. Leave us alone." Maya lifted a trembling hand. "Sir, please." "Back away from him. Now. Someone call security." Maya steadied herself, breath shaking. The room buzzed. Blood dripped between her fingers as she pressed her hand to the wound. Her vision danced at the edges, but her feet carried her forward anyway. "Ma'am, stop," another server hissed. "Let them handle it." But no one was handling it. Maya moved softly toward the boy. She lowered herself, knees brushing shattered china, her shoulder throbbing hot. Lucas's hand reached for another glass. "Baby," Maya whispered, voice tender and tired like someone who had seen too much to judge anymore. "You don't gotta fight so hard. I'm right here." Lucas froze mid-sob. A trembling breath, a soft hiccup. He stared at her. Lost, confused. Clinging to the single gentle voice in a world of yelling, she extended her hand, not forcing, not pleading, offering. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "You're safe." Then the restaurant went death still. A hush fell heavy as velvet. Thomas's jaw slackened. Guests watched in baffled awe. Maya held Lucas's hand like it was a lifeline, and for him, it was. Maya exhaled shakily. Lucas leaned into her chest like a child exhausted from holding up his own sky. Thomas's face went slack. Disbelief warred with relief in pride's last gasp. He had spent fortunes on therapists, specialists, tutors, yet peace arrived in the hands of a bleeding waitress. But fate had one more blow to swing. A server cart overloaded with stacked plates and glassware tilted near the dessert station. A busboy, shaken by the chaos, bumped it by accident. The metal frame wobbled, then tipped. Trays, glasses, ceramic bowls began to rain downward. Maya turned instinctively. In a single breath, she wrapped her arms around Lucas and pivoted, shielding him with her body as the cart crashed down. Glass rained like ice. A heavy wooden serving board struck Maya across the back. A wine bottle rolled, smashing beside her hip. She swallowed a cry as white-hot pain shot down her spine. Lucas clung to her shirt, face pressed to her shoulder. Thomas Reed stood frozen, breath choking in his throat. His son, his only child, held safe in the arms of a woman he had just accused, who was now bleeding because she chose to protect him. His voice cracked when it returned. "Call 911. Now." Staff scrambled. Phones raised. Someone rushed forward with napkins. She blinked through blurring light, forcing a soft, faint smile for the little boy still pressed to her. Lucas didn't scream. He didn't thrash. He held her. Tiny fingers clawed into her uniform like she was the last safe thing left on earth. Maya tried to stay upright, tried to speak, but her vision blurred, blood pulsing warm beneath her collar. Her legs wobbled. Thomas lunged instinctively, catching her just before she tipped. The irony slammed into him harder than the shelf had hit her. She had bled to protect his son from a world he couldn't control, and he had attacked her first. She felt herself slide sideways. The ground came up slow, distant, voices muffled like underwater murmurs. "Maya, stay with us." "Sir, she's losing blood fast." "Lucas, sweetheart, she's okay, come to Daddy." But Lucas didn't let go. Not this time. The last thing Maya saw was the chandelier lights fracturing into stars. And the boy's face quiet now, eyes steady, holding her the way only someone who knew grief would. Then darkness folded around her like a tired embrace. A quiet hand had reached into a storm and chose to stay there. If this moment moved you, hit like and comment where you're watching from. Someone nearby might be watching too. Maya's world narrowed into blinks of light and warmth and pain. Sirens screamed faintly in the distance, somewhere behind the blur of chandeliers and murmurs in marble. She could feel Lucas still holding her, his tiny fingers wrapped so tightly around hers it almost hurt. Almost. But pain was a small price to pay when the child who'd been spiraling just moments ago was now breathing evenly against her. She fought to stay conscious. "Don't fall asleep," someone said again. "Thomas," she thought, his voice low and unsteady. She didn't answer. Couldn't. The pain had spread across her back, and her shoulder burned from the jagged edge of the plate. But the weight of Lucas's trust kept her grounded. A boy who'd been thrashing against the world now held onto her like a lifeline. He hadn't let go. Paramedics rushed in. The voices of uniformed men and women swirled around her. Blood pressure, laceration, possible concussion. She caught glimpses of sterile gloves and flashlights in her eyes. Someone tried to separate her from Lucas. "No," the boy whispered, suddenly tightening his grip on her sleeve. "Don't." A medic crouched beside him. "It's okay, buddy. We just need to help her. She's gonna be all right." But Lucas wouldn't budge. Maya blinked through the fog and summoned enough strength to whisper, "It's okay, sweetheart. You stay close. I'll be right behind you." Her voice was shaky but calm, like the slow hum of a lullaby. Lucas nodded, reluctantly letting go, only after she was lifted gently onto a stretcher. His small hand hovered near hers the whole time. Thomas trailed beside them, stunned, helpless. He walked silently as the medics wheeled Maya through the restaurant, past silent tables and eyes that refused to meet his. Moments ago, those same guests were watching him with admiration. Now they looked through him, as if he were the scandal. Once outside, the cold night slapped Maya's cheeks, pulling her back to the surface. The flash of cameras ignited across the parking area, paparazzi already circling like vultures. "Mr. Reed, is your son all right? Is that the waitress? Did she assault him or save him? Who is she?" Thomas turned, jaw tight. "Back off." The reporters didn't listen. But the paramedics got Maya into the ambulance quickly, and Lucas, after clinging to her hand, was gently ushered into the back seat of Thomas's private black SUV, still visibly shaken. Inside the ambulance, a medic dabbed at Maya's shoulder while securing an oxygen mask over her mouth. "She's stable," the woman muttered to her partner, "but she's gonna need stitches. Possible bruised ribs." Maya blinked once. "The boy, he's okay," the medic assured her. "He's safe. You did good." Those words curled inside her chest like a bomb. Not praise, just truth. You did good. The hospital was bright, sterile, and impersonal. She was wheeled into a room, patched up, bandaged, then left alone with a warm blanket and a cup of water that trembled slightly in her grip. She sat there in silence for what felt like hours. Then the door creaked. Thomas Reed stepped inside. He looked like a man pulled from two different worlds. The tailored suit still clung to his tall frame, but his tie hung loose and wrinkled. His hair was mussed, and there was a smear of something champagne, on his cuff. He stood there for a long moment, staring at her. I misjudged you. Maya didn't say anything. She wasn't sure she trusted herself to. I yelled at you, he added, blamed you, while you were bleeding. She looked at him now. His face, usually seen in newspapers and investment profiles, was different up close, less polished, more human. The lines at his eyes weren't from age. They were from exhaustion. I didn't come in here for forgiveness, he said. Just answers. Maya lowered the cup, then asked, what did you do that no one else could? Her throat tightened. She looked away. I listened. To what? She met his eyes again. To what he wasn't saying. Thomas exhaled, then moved to the visitor's chair and sat, rubbing his hands over his face. He hasn't spoken in months. Not since. He trailed off. I thought it was just grief, but maybe it's something worse. Maya paused. It is grief, but grief's never just. For some kids, it turns into silence. For others, rage. Thomas nodded slowly. He said one word tonight. No. She smiled faintly. That took more strength than any of us can imagine. They sat in silence for a long moment. The air in the room carried the weight of something unspoken. I want to cover your hospital bill, Thomas said. That's non-negotiable. Maya didn't protest. I also want you to come to the house tomorrow. I'd like you to speak to Lucas again. Just talk, if you're willing. She raised an eyebrow. Is that an offer or an order? Thomas chuckled dryly. A desperate request. Maya nodded slowly. I'll think about it. He stood, buttoned his coat, and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. He wouldn't let go of your hand. Maya looked down at her fingers, still faintly marked by the pressure of a child's grip. I didn't want him to, she said softly. When he left, she leaned back into the pillow, letting the silence settle again. Outside her hospital window, the city lights shimmered like quiet promises. Somewhere out there, a boy was finally sleeping, and the world had shifted just a little because someone had been brave enough to reach out a hand and stay. The next morning came slower than most. Maya lay in the stiff hospital bed as the sun stretched its fingers across the faded tile floor. The steady beep of the monitor the only sound in the room. Her shoulder throbbed with each breath, wrapped tightly in gauze. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucas's face red and tear-streaked, trembling, and then his fingers sliding into hers like a prayer. She kept replaying the moment the shelf toppled. Not the pain, not the crash, but the instinct, the decision to protect him. How natural it had been. She hadn't even hesitated. A nurse entered around 7, cheerful and brisk, checking vitals and noting that Maya would be discharged by noon. You're a lucky one, she said, smiling as she adjusted the 4. Could have been worse. Guess I've been worse before, Maya murmured, half to herself. The nurse paused, giving her a look that balanced curiosity and kindness. That boy. The little one you saved. He yours? Maya hesitated. No, but maybe for one night, he was. When the nurse left, Maya sat up slowly, wincing as the movement tugged at her stitches. She dressed in silence, slipping back into the clothes they'd folded neatly for her, still spotted with dried blood and fine glass dust. No one had brought a change. She didn't expect they would. She barely had time to gather her things when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering. Then she answered. Miss Williams? A professional voice greeted. Female. Efficient. Mr. Reed has asked that I escort you to his residence. A car is waiting outside. Maya blinked. Wait, what? Who is this? I'm his assistant. Mr. Reed would like to speak with you personally at the house. Lucas has been asking for you. She looked down at the IV band still taped to her inner elbow. The edge of the hospital bracelet peeked from her sleeve. I was just released. I haven't even had. There's fresh clothing in the vehicle, Mr. Reed insisted. Maya almost laughed. Of course he did. 15 minutes later, she found herself in the back of a sleek black Lincoln Navigator. The kind of car she usually saw with tinted windows and security detail. The seats smelled like leather and money. A navy blue dress and matching flats waited on the seat beside her, wrapped in tissue paper. She touched the fabric, soft, simple, respectful, not flashy. Someone had chosen carefully. The city blurred by. Graffiti-tagged brick faded into brownstone, then into pristine streets, lined with wrought iron and old oaks. When the car passed through the gates of the Reed estate, she felt like she'd crossed a border not just into another neighborhood, but into another country. The mansion rose up like a courthouse, severe and silent, all sharp lines and polished stone. Ivy crept around the columns, but not enough to soften them. Two men in suits stood at the front door like they'd been carved from the same marble as the stairs. Maya stepped out slowly, holding her breath as the driver opened the door. Inside, the entryway was larger than her entire apartment. The floor gleamed like glass, reflecting chandeliers and the dark wood of the double staircase. Somewhere deep in the house, a grandfather clock ticked solemnly. Thomas Reed stood at the bottom of the stairs. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms, slacks, no tie, still polished, but human. His eyes scanned her carefully, shoulder bandaged, lips pressed together, back straight despite everything. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I didn't really say I would." "No," he said, lips curving into the faintest ghost of a smile. "But I had a feeling you might." Before Maya could respond, the sound of small, rapid footsteps echoed from the hallway. Then Lucas appeared, in a t-shirt and socks, his hair still tousled from sleep. He stopped when he saw her, eyes wide, cautious, hopeful. Maya crouched gently, mindful of her injury, and held out a hand. "Hey there, sugar." Lucas didn't run. He walked slow and unsure until he was close enough to touch her fingers. He looked up at her, lip quivering. "You came," he whispered. She smiled, warm and steady. "I told you I'd be right behind you, didn't I?" He nodded and slipped his hand into hers again. Thomas watched the entire exchange in silence, arms folded, face unreadable. "Lucas," he said gently, "why don't you go to the den? Maya and I need to talk for just a minute." Lucas hesitated, still holding on to her hand. Maya bent closer. "I'll be right there, okay? Just a little grown-up talk." The boy finally nodded and disappeared down the hall, glancing back once before turning the corner. Thomas gestured toward the sitting room, a sunlit space with cream-colored armchairs and tall windows. Maya sat cautiously. "So, what exactly is this?" Thomas took a moment, crossing to the mantel, resting a hand on it like it anchored him. "I've had 10 therapists in the last year, 4 educational specialists, a behavioral consultant. Not one of them has gotten through to him." Maya raised a brow. "And you think I have?" "I think you're the only one he trusts." She exhaled. "That's not a job title, Mr. Reed. I'm not offering you a job." Her eyes narrowed. "Then what are you offering?" Thomas turned to face her fully. "A place. In his life. In this house. As someone consistent. Not hired help. Not under a contract. You want me to just show up?" "I want you to stay," he said simply. Maya went quiet. She looked at the door Lucas had gone through. She could already feel the strings tightening in her chest. "I don't belong in houses like this." "Apparently," Thomas said, "you belong more than I do." That caught her off guard. "I'll pay you whatever you need," he added. She shook her head. "It's not about the money." He nodded. "Good. Then it's about Lucas." She stood, slow and deliberate. "I'll stay. Today. But that's all I'm promising." Thomas didn't push, just nodded. "Fair enough." As she walked toward the hallway, her steps echoed off polished floors that still felt like foreign soil, but the sound of Lucas's quiet hum from the other room grounded her. He was waiting, and for now, that was reason enough. Maya followed the sound of Lucas's voice down the hall, her flats barely making a sound on the gleaming wood floors. The house was so quiet, it felt like it was waiting to exhale. Every step carried the weight of uncertainty, like she was walking through a museum where everything, including herself, was on display. The hallway curved into a sunken den lined with bookshelves and tall windows. Lucas sat on the rug in the center of the room, a pile of building blocks around him, his back to the door. He was humming softly, off-key and aimless, like a child trying to fill the silence with something familiar. Maya lingered at the doorway for a moment, watching. She noticed the faint rhythm of his movements, the way he lined up the blocks in rows before knocking them over gently, then starting again. There was something soothing in it. Not joy. Not quite sadness. Just motion, repetition, control. She stepped in. Lucas turned immediately. When he saw her, he didn't smile, but he didn't flinch either. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hey there, sugar," Maya replied, easing herself down to the floor with slow care. Her shoulder ached, but she didn't show it. "Whatcha building?" He shrugged. "Nothing, just making noise." Maya nodded like that was the most reasonable answer in the world. "Noise can be good sometimes. Lets people know you're still here." Lucas looked at her, his expression serious. "Do you think Mommy hears me?" The question hit her like a breath she wasn't expecting. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and picked up a block, running her fingers over its edges. "I think the people who love us don't stop listening, even when they're not here like they used to be." Lucas didn't respond, but his eyes dropped to the rug, his fingers tightening around a block. "I miss her," he whispered. Maya swallowed. "I know." They sat in silence, side by side, stacking blocks. Not speaking. Just breathing the same air. In another part of the house, Thomas stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed, watching the security feed on a mounted monitor. The camera in the den showed Maya and Lucas just two figures on the floor, surrounded by bright plastic. He couldn't hear them, but the stillness on the screen made something stir in his chest. She was doing it again, reaching him, quietly, without tactics or training, without credentials, just being there. Thomas's assistant, Marianne, entered the kitchen with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Reed, the press is still circling. Boston Globe wants a statement. There's speculation that last night was a publicity stunt." He scoffed. "A publicity stunt where I let my son have a meltdown in a room full of donors and my waitress gets crushed by a champagne cart?" Marianne tilted her head. "Just telling you what they're printing." "Nick," he sighed. "No statements yet. Let it blow over. You're aware people are calling her the Miracle Maid?" Thomas looked back at the screen. Maya reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Lucas's ear. The boy didn't even flinch. "She's not a maid," he said softly. Back in the den, Lucas had stopped building. He lay on his side now, head resting on Maya's thigh, his eyes fluttering. "You tired, sweetheart?" He nodded. "Want me to tell you a story?" "Not a made-up one." "One." Maya smiled gently. "Okay, real story then." When I was little, I had a brother. Still do. He was real small, smaller than you even, but he thought he had to be tough all the time." Lucas blinked slowly, watching her. "He didn't cry when our mama got sick. Not even at the funeral. But I saw him at night, curled up in his bed, fists clenched, breathing like he couldn't find air. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat beside him. That's it, just Saturday." Lucas didn't speak, but his hand reached for hers. "Sometimes," Maya added, "what people need isn't a fix, just a witness." Outside, Thomas had stepped away from the kitchen. He walked slowly down the hall, drawn by something he couldn't explain. When he reached the doorway to the den, he stopped short. Lucas was fast asleep in Maya's lap. Her good arm rested lightly across his back. Her eyes were closed too, head tilted against the couch, her body still tense, despite the calm in the room. Thomas stood there for a long moment, watching. Then he backed away without a word. Later that afternoon, after Lucas had been put to bed and the house returned to its usual hush, Maya found herself in the front parlor with a cup of warm tea, sitting in the same seat as earlier. The butler, Mr. Gaines, a man in his 60s with a soft voice and military posture, had brought it to her himself. "Chamomile," he said. "Hope that's all right, Miss Williams." "Perfect," she replied. "Thank you." He gave her a faint smile. "My grandson saw you on the news this morning. Said, 'Grandpa, that lady's a hero.'" Maya chuckled softly. "I don't feel like one. Most heroes don't." After he left, Thomas entered again, holding a folder. He sat opposite her, looking unusually uncomfortable. "I had a contract drawn up," he said, laying it on the coffee table. "For a position, caregiver, guide, whatever word makes sense to you." Maya eyed it without touching it. "That's fast." He nodded. "I don't do slow. Maybe that's part of the problem." His jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. "I'm not looking for paperwork," she continued. "I didn't come here for a job." "Then why did you come?" Maya leaned forward, fingers cradling the cup. "Because a little boy asked me not to leave." "No." Thomas stared at her, the edges of his composure fraying. "He needs consistency." "I know," she said, "but so do I." She rose, setting the cup down carefully. "I'll come by again tomorrow, but not because of that paper, because he asked." And with that, she turned and walked out the front door of the mansion, stepping once more across the cold marble floors of power, this time with her head held high. The next morning was gray. Not stormy, not bright, just the kind of muted light that makes the world feel suspended in waiting. Maya stood in front of the mirror in her tiny apartment's bathroom, wrapping a fresh bandage over her shoulder. The sting had faded to a steady ache, manageable, but the bruising had deepened into a dark plum shadow down her back. She winced as she fastened her bra strap. "Shouldn't be going back already," she muttered, half to herself, half to the reflection of her mother's picture taped to the corner of the mirror. But then she thought of Lucas, the way he reached for her, the way he whispered, "You came." That alone was reason enough. In the living room, her younger brother, Davon, sat hunched over the table, headphones on, sketching something furiously in his notebook. The smell of reheated instant oatmeal lingered in the air. "You headed back to that fancy mansion?" he asked without looking up. "I am," she said. He glanced at her bandaged shoulder, then at her dress, a simple pale blue wrap dress she found at the second-hand store. "They paying you yet?" Maya paused. "It's complicated," Davon snorted. "You took a plate to the chest for that, kid. Doesn't get more uncomplicated than that." She grabbed her keys. "I'll be back before dinner." Davon looked up, frowning. "Maya, just be careful. Don't let them rich folks turn you into something you're not." "I won't," she said, but her voice was softer than she intended. The black SUV was waiting again, this time parked respectfully at the curb, instead of double-parked like the night of the incident. The driver greeted her by name, holding the door with a nod. No small talk, no music, just silence and streets that gradually became cleaner, quieter, more expensive. When they pulled into the circular driveway of the Reed estate, Maya noticed fresh hydrangeas planted along the walkway, new blooms, white, deliberate. The front door opened before she knocked. It was Thomas. "Maya," he said, like her name was something uncertain in his mouth. "Mr. Reed," she replied evenly. They stood in the grand entry for a beat too long. The tension was thick, not quite hostile, but heavy with unspoken rules neither of them had agreed to. "I appreciate you coming back." "I came for Lucas." He gave a slight nod. "He's in the solarium with his nanny. But before you see him, I'd like to talk." Maya followed him through a hallway that smelled faintly of leather and old wood. They entered a private study, a masculine room of navy walls, gold trim, and a globe bar cart untouched in the corner. Thomas motioned to a chair. She sat stiffly, back straight, hands folded. He opened a folder on the desk. "I've had time to think. I realize now I approached this wrong." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You think?" Thomas met her gaze. "You don't pull a child back from the edge like that and call it luck." "I didn't do anything magical," she said quietly. "I saw a little boy who needed someone not to run from him." "That's exactly what no one else has done," he said. "They either feared him, dismissed him, or tried to fix him. You didn't." He slid a new document toward her. "So, here's what I'm proposing. A position not under contract, but with full autonomy. You set your own hours. Come and go. Be with Lucas when it works for him and for you." Maya eyed the folder but didn't touch it. "I won't call you a nanny," he added. "That's not what you are. You're something else." She looked at him, unsure how to receive that. "This also comes with full health benefits, access to transportation, and a salary equivalent to what I pay Lucas's therapist." Maya exhaled through her nose. "You think this is about the money?" "No," Thomas said, "but I think not offering it would insult what you've already done." She stared at the document. Not the number, not the perks. The word that stood out most was her own name typed neatly at the top. "Lucas trusts me now," she said, "but that can change. Kids don't hold trust unless you protect it." "I know, and I'm not here to make you look good." His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded again. I don't work under people, she continued. I work with them. And I won't let this house turn me into a stranger to myself. You have my word, Thomas said. She gave him a long look. Words are cheap where I come from. I know, he repeated, but I meant it when I said you belong here more than I do. That gave her pause. Finally, she reached forward and closed the folder, not signing it, not rejecting it. I'll show up tomorrow, she said. Not because of that paper, because he's expecting me. Thomas stood. That's more than I could have asked for. As Maya left the study, she passed by a small alcove where a faded photograph rested behind glass. A woman elegant, smiling, unmistakably Lucas's mother. The soft curve of her mouth, the same as his when he slept. She stopped, studied it for a moment, then kept walking. In the solarium, Lucas was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, staring out at the rose garden through a wall of windows. When he saw her, he lit up, not loud or dramatic, just a quiet, flickering warmth across his face. You came back, he said. Maya smiled and knelt beside him. Told you. I keep my word. He leaned against her arm right where the bandage was, and she didn't even flinch. They sat in silence for a while, just watching the petals fall. And somewhere in the house, Thomas stood at a distance, watching them through the glass, wondering when the last time was he had seen his son this still. Lucas had always hated nap time. His mother used to rock him gently in an old pinewood chair, humming that same off-key lullaby while the world outside his nursery faded. But after she died, there were no lullabies, just clinical silence and hired help who tried too hard. Quiet became uncomfortable. Sleep, a war zone. But now, curled beside Maya on a velvet chaise in the solarium, he slept soundly, one hand still clutching the hem of her sleeve, as if to make sure she didn't vanish while his eyes were closed. Maya didn't move. She could feel the soft rise and fall of his breathing against her side, the steady weight of a child finally safe enough to rest. The ache in her shoulder was a dull hum now, manageable. What tugged harder was the weight of being needed. This wasn't like bussing tables or wiping counters. This was something else entirely. The silence was warm, almost sacred. She closed her eyes for a moment, and then she heard its shoes. Polished leather on marble tile, a practiced stride, steady, confident, controlled. Thomas, he didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the doorway of the solarium, arms crossed loosely, watching his son, eyes softened in a way Maya hadn't yet seen. The sunlight poured through the glass wall, framing Lucas's curls and casting shadows on his small, round cheeks. He's never done that, Thomas said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Sleep, Maya murmured. Sleep near anyone, he clarified. Not since the funeral. Maya looked up at him, her voice calm. Grief turned skin into armor. Thomas nodded, stepping further into the room. You make it look easy. It's not, she said, but it's honest. Kids feel that. Bye. He sat down slowly on the far edge of the window seat, across from them, careful not to disturb the stillness. My staff says he only lets you feed him when you're around. Yesterday, the chef said Lucas refused breakfast and wouldn't speak to anyone until he saw you on the camera. Maya blinked. You have cameras in the kitchen? Everywhere, Thomas said flatly. Security, staff monitoring, you name it. She didn't answer right away, but the way her eyes narrowed said enough. I know how it sounds, he added. This place doesn't know how to be a home. It's just efficient. That's not the same thing, Maya replied. A home listens. This place echoes. Thomas tilted his head, something resembling a grim smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. You always speak like that? Like what? Like a quiet warning. She shrugged, gently adjusting Lucas's head as he stirred slightly. It's how people listen when they won't let you raise your voice. No, he didn't respond, just stared at the boy sleeping in her lap. I used to think time would fix it, he said. I gave Lucas space. Therapists, toys, routine, but nothing worked. Time doesn't fix what people won't face, Maya replied. There was a pause between them, filled only with the soft rustling of wind brushing against the glass windows. Outside, garden staff were tending to hedges. Faces turned politely away. You've been through it too, haven't you? Thomas asked, eyes never leaving hers. Maya's throat tightened. She nodded once. I lost my mama when I was 12. She worked cleaning offices at night. got sick, too proud to stop working, too poor to get help in time. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And your father? Gone before I could remember him. That's a lot to carry. Maya looked down at Lucas. It's only heavy when no one helps you hold it. Thomas fell silent again, his gaze sharpening with thought. Lucas used to cling to his mother. He wouldn't sleep without her arm around him. After she passed, he started hitting himself, throwing things. The shrinks called it sensory grief displacement. I just called it pain. Maya nodded slowly. He doesn't need definitions. He needs presence. Thomas looked up. And you just knew that? No, Maya said, voice steady. I remembered it. The stillness between them was no longer awkward. It had shifted, become shared. Why did you come back? Thomas asked suddenly. After everything. After I yelled at you. After you were hurt. Maya didn't flinch, because that little boy was screaming for help, and no one else could hear him but me. He didn't argue. I'm not here for a paycheck, Mr. Reed, she added. I'm here because Lucas deserves someone who doesn't see him as broken. Thomas leaned back, his expression unreadable, but something behind his eyes moved just slightly. I've built skyscrapers, he said, closed deals worth billions. But I've never felt as powerless as I did watching my son scream in that restaurant. Maya's voice was gentle. Power doesn't mean anything if it can't reach the people who need it. Lucas stirred again, shifting closer into her side. Maya brushed a hand across his hair, soft and careful. Thomas stood. I have a meeting in 15, but I'll be back by lunch. Will you stay? For now, Maya said, never breaking her gaze from Lucas's sleeping face. But this isn't permanent. I understand. And don't try to make it transactional. He hesitated. What if I want to make it real? Maya looked up, eyes steady. Then show up, not with money, with effort. Thomas nodded and left the room. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher over the estate, Maya sat with Lucas in the shade of the garden pergola. They watched a squirrel dart along the top of the fence, tail twitching. Lucas laughed soft and breathy, like the sound had forgotten how to come out and was learning again. She turned toward him. Feels better to laugh, huh? Lucas nodded. I don't feel like I'm stuck in a loud room anymore. Maya smiled, her heart clenching. I think your storm's learning how to rest, she whispered. And in that garden, beneath the filtered light, surrounded by roses and quiet wealth, something began to take root. Not just healing, but the slow, steady growth of something like trust. Dinner at the Reed household had always been a formality. Crystal glasses, silver flatware, food plated like art, never meant to be touched by hands, much less enjoyed in the messy, primal way children sometimes eat when they're truly hungry. Tonight, however, something was different. Lucas sat at the table not with the stiffness of a boy trained into manners, but with the calm of someone finally invited to belong. His feet dangled above the floor, one sock half slipping off. He didn't wear shoes. Or a collared shirt, just a soft blue t-shirt with a faded dinosaur on the front and mashed potatoes on his chin. Maya sat beside him, in the same seat where a long line of nannies had once perched uncomfortably. But she wasn't on edge. She didn't watch him like a problem to be solved. She passed the bread basket, helped him cut his roast chicken into little bites, and nodded in approval when he wiped his mouth on the napkin on the second try. Across the table sat Thomas, still in his dress shirt from work, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His tie was gone. His phone was face down. For once, his posture was less Wall Street, more man in his own home. The dining room was quiet, but not tense. Just warm, almost like a family, until it wasn't. Lucas suddenly put his fork down and looked at Thomas. Do you believe in ghosts? The question caught both adults off guard. Thomas blinked. Ghosts? Yeah, Lucas said. Mom's been gone for a long time, but I think she came back last night. Maya stayed still, watching. Thomas's face twitched just once. Why do you think that? He asked gently. Because I felt warm, on my back, like when she used to hold me. He looked at Maya. Except it was Maya, but it felt the same. The silence that followed was sharp, almost sacred. Maya placed her hand lightly over Lucas's. I think when we miss someone hard enough, she said, the love they gave us doesn't leave. It stays in our bodies, in how we remember to breathe. in the way we hold others. Lucas nodded solemnly, accepting this like a sacred truth. But Thomas looked away. Maya saw it, that flicker in his jaw, the shift in his shoulders, the silence he didn't know how to fill. Lucas, Thomas said after a beat, why don't you go get your sketchbook? Show Maya the picture you drew yesterday. Lucas hopped off his chair, his socked feet pattering across the floor. When he was out of earshot, Thomas leaned forward. I didn't know he remembered her like that. Maya's voice stayed soft. Grief doesn't fade, it just hides. He exhaled sharply. She died 2 weeks before his 5th birthday. She always said we had time, that we could slow down later. Now there's just this emptiness. Maya folded her napkin carefully. Then fill it, with presence, with effort. Thomas looked up. You always say that, effort, like it's some magic word. It is, she said. For people who've never been given much, it's the difference between surviving and healing. Lucas returned moments later, waving a spiral notebook with crumpled corners. He opened it to a messy crayon drawing. Stick figures holding hands under a giant red sundae. One tall, one small, one in a blue dress. That's me, Lucas pointed, and that's Daddy, and that's you. Maya smiled, genuine and wide. That's a pretty good likeness, especially the hair. Lucas laughed. Thomas looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he stood and did something Maya didn't expect. He walked over to Lucas, knelt beside him, and placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. You did good, buddy. Lucas Biamed. And for a second, just a second, Thomas Reed looked like a father. After dinner, as Maya helped Lucas brush his teeth upstairs, Thomas lingered in the hallway, watching from a distance. Her voice echoed faintly from the bathroom. 2 minutes. No cheating. Brush in little circles, not like you're scrubbing a floor. Lucas giggled. It was a sound Thomas hadn't heard in months. A sound he thought he'd lost. Later, when Lucas was tucked into bed and Maya was gathering her bag to leave, Thomas stopped her at the top of the staircase. Can I ask you something personal? Maya raised an eyebrow but nodded. You can ask. Why haven't you walked away? She paused. I've had people treat me like I didn't matter, she said quietly. At work. At school. In the ER when I brought my mama in, and no one believed me. Thomas said nothing. So when someone finally sees you, even if it's a child, it makes it hard to walk away. He studied her face. Do you see me? Maya's eyes didn't flinch. I see a man trying to buy back time with his son, but love isn't a transaction. Thomas absorbed the blow with a tight nod. Maya slung her bag over her shoulder, wincing slightly at the healing wound. You want to fix everything, Mr. Reed. But this is one thing you'll have to earn, the slow way. She descended the stairs, leaving him standing in the dim hallway. Not broken, but cracked wide open. And maybe, just maybe, ready to change. The next morning, Maya arrived at the Reed estate earlier than usual. The air was thick with autumn chill, and the driveway glistened with dew. The trees lining the gate had begun their slow surrender into shades of amber and rust, as if the house itself were finally breathing with the seasons. She stepped out of the car, still wearing her thrifted navy coat and a wool scarf too big for her frame. The security guard at the gate nodded with a familiarity that hadn't existed last week. Even the butler, Mr. Gaines, offered her a rare smile as he opened the front door. Morning, Miss Williams, he said gently. Morning, Mr. Gaines, she replied, stepping inside. The house, usually stiff and echoing, felt warmer, not in temperature, in tone. As if the silence had softened somehow. Less judgmental, less hollow. As she stepped into the main hallway, a voice called out. In the studio, Maya turned toward the west wing, an area she hadn't explored yet. She followed the voice down a corridor she hadn't noticed before, lined with tall, moody oil paintings of men in old suits and women with eyes that didn't quite meet the viewer's gaze. At the end of the hall, the door stood ajar. She pushed it open and found Thomas, standing in front of a large canvas, shirt sleeves rolled up, paint on his forearms. She blinked. Is this what billionaires do before breakfast? Thomas turned, wiping his hands on a cloth. Only the stressed ones. Men. Maya stepped inside cautiously. The studio was a bright, high-ceilinged room filled with light from tall, arched windows. Several canvases leaned against the walls, some finished, some abandoned halfway through. The air smelled of linseed oil and turpentine. "I didn't know you painted," she said. Thomas smirked. "It's one of the few things I never monetized." She glanced at the painting he'd been working on. It wasn't polished. It was raw, stormy strokes of charcoal gray and muted blues, the image of a tree standing against heavy wind. "You painted this from memory?" she asked. "No," he said, "from feeling." She looked at him, then really looked. Beneath the suits and stock prices and press statements, there was a man trying to climb out of the version of himself the world had applauded. "You seem different today," she said. Thomas stepped toward the window. "You ever realize something about yourself too late?" Maya didn't reply. He continued. "When I was younger, I thought success meant isolation. I climbed the ladder, made enemies, cut ties. I told myself I was building a legacy. And now," Maya asked. He turned back to her. "Now I'm watching my son cling to the only person in this house who hasn't asked him to be anything he's not." Maya's voice was steady. "Lucas doesn't need a legacy. He needs a father." Ezel. Thomas flinched, but not in anger, in recognition. "I'm trying," he said, "but I don't know how." "You show up," she said, "even when you don't know what to say, even when it's messy." He nodded slowly. "Like you do." "I've had practice," she replied. Thomas walked to a corner of the studio where a small side table held 2 mugs. He handed one to her. "Chamomile," he said. "Figured you'd need it." Maya accepted it without comment. They stood there in silence for a moment, not as boss and employee, not as billionaire and maid, just as 2 people trying to make sense of loss, in different ways. Then, a sound broke the moment. A scream, muffled, distant but unmistakable. Maya's mug clattered onto the table as she bolted down the hall. Thomas was right behind her. The scream came from upstairs. Lucas. When they reached his room, the door was open. Lucas sat on the floor, sobbing, rocking back and forth with his hands clamped over his ears. Beside him, the nanny, a young woman with a clipboard and Bluetooth in her ear, stood frozen, unsure what to do. I just told him he had to get dressed for his lesson," she stammered. He started screaming out of nowhere. Maya rushed forward, kneeling beside Lucas. Hey, sugar, I'm here." He didn't look up. She gently removed one of his hands from his ear and placed it over her heartbeat. "Feel that? That's mine. Still here. Still strong." Lucas began to slow. His rocking faded. His breathing eased. He looked up, eyes red, lips trembling. "I don't want to do the lesson." "You don't have to," Maya whispered. "But the lady said." Maya turned to the nanny, eyes sharp. "Leave." The woman hesitated. Then, under Thomas's hardened gaze, she gathered her clipboard and left. Maya sat back, cradling Lucas. "What was the lesson about?" "Public speaking," he murmured. She blinked. "Public, he's 5. Thomas exhaled heavily. "It's part of a developmental confidence curriculum. Something his old school recommended." Maya looked at him, fire in her voice. "He doesn't need a curriculum. He needs space to be 5. Thomas ran a hand through his hair. "You're right. You're right." Lucas leaned into Maya's side, still trembling. "Do I have to talk in front of people, Maya?" She shook her head. "Not if you don't want to. Your voice is a gift, but no one gets to demand it before you're ready." He clung to her tighter. Thomas stepped forward, kneeling beside them. "Lucas, I'm sorry. I thought those lessons would help you." Lucas didn't speak, but he didn't move away, either. That night, after Maya left, Thomas walked back into the studio. He stared at the unfinished painting, the one of the tree in the storm. He picked up the brush, and this time, he added light. It was raining the next morning, not a downpour, but the kind of soft drizzle that blurred the world behind a curtain of silver mist. The windows of the Reed estate steamed gently, and the garden looked like a watercolor left too long in the Sunday. Maya arrived without her usual composure. The door opened before she could knock. Mr. Gaines already waiting with a towel in hand. "Rain caught you, Miss Williams?" Maya took the towel with a thankful nod. "Didn't bring the umbrella. Rookie mistake." As she stepped inside, she noticed something peculiar: silence. Not the heavy, unnatural silence that used to hang in this house, but a different kind. A quiet that felt suspended. like the house was listening. She heard Lucas before she saw him. Faint giggles from the music room. Maya followed the sound. What she found made her stop in the doorway. Thomas sat on the piano bench, shoulders awkward but committed, pecking at the keys like someone learning to type. Lucas sat beside him, legs swinging, watching his father play with wide-eyed amusement. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't even in key. But it was real. "You're not supposed to hit that one," Lucas said, pointing. "I'm pretty sure that was jazz," Thomas replied. "Jazz sounds better." They both laughed. Maya leaned against the doorframe, smiling. Thomas noticed her and stood up abruptly, embarrassed. "I didn't hear you come in. I didn't want to interrupt the jazz." "Lucas Billionaire. Daddy's learning my song." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Your song?" "The one Mommy used to hum." Maya stepped inside slowly. "Can you play it for me?" Lucas looked at the keys, then at Maya, then slowly shook his head. "Not ready." She knelt down, level with his eyes. "That's okay. I'll wait." Lucas leaned in and hugged her, brief but fierce. When he pulled away, he whispered, "You smell like oatmeal again." She laughed. "Good. That means I'm still me." Thomas watched the exchange quietly, something softening in his gaze. "He asked for you the moment he woke up." Maya turned to him. "That mean you're firing the new therapist?" "She quit," Thomas replied. "After yesterday. Said she wasn't equipped for this level of attachment." Translation: "She didn't like being challenged by a 5-year-old. Maya muttered. Thomas chuckled. "Something like that." Maya stood, brushing invisible dust from her coat. "So what now?" Thomas folded his arms. "I was hoping you'd tell me." Maya glanced at Lucas, now absorbed in trying to recreate the C major scale. "Now, we stop acting like this is temporary." Thomas nodded slowly. "Agreed." They moved into the living room, where Maya helped Lucas build a fort out of couch cushions and throw blankets. Thomas watched from a chair nearby, phone ignored, laptop closed. Maya noticed. "You know, most CEOs would have flown to Tokyo by now. I canceled the trip." "Why?" Thomas shrugged. "You said show up." Maya didn't reply, but her lips tugged upward, just a little. Later that afternoon, while Lucas napped under a blanket fort lit with fairy lights, Maya sat alone in the kitchen. The cook, a wiry older woman named Martha, placed a cup of hot cider in front of her. "You've done something good here," Martha said. Maya glanced up. "Just showing up. That's more than most," the woman replied. "I've worked here 6 years. Never seen that boy smile like that." Maya stirred the cider, her spoon tapping softly against the mug. "He's trying. Every minute." Martha leaned in, lowering her voice. "And him the father. You're changing him too." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I doubt that." "Oh, honey, rich men don't cancel Tokyo for just anyone." Just then, footsteps approached. Thomas entered, holding a small wooden box. "Maya," he said, "got a minute?" She followed him into the study. He placed the box on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten, some folded, others still in envelopes. "They're hers," he said. "Julia's. My wife's." Maya looked down, heart tightening. "You kept them all?" "Everyone." He picked one up and handed it to her. It was dated 2 weeks before Julia died. "Tom, if anything ever happens to me, promise me you won't shut down. Promise me you won't build a fortress around our boy. He needs softness, not just safety. He needs someone who listens, not someone who wins." Maya read the letter twice. "She knew," Maya said softly. "She always knew," Thomas whispered. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "I'm trying to do this right, but I need help." Maya closed the box. "Then let's do it slow. No contracts, no labels. Just effort." Thomas nodded, emotion threatening to spill over. Maya stood. "Now go sit with your son. He's gonna wake up soon and want to finish that song." As Thomas left the room, Maya lingered. She looked around the study, the rich mahogany shelves, the polished furniture, and realized this room, like its owner, was beginning to change. Not fast, not all at once, but enough to matter. It was Lucas who broke the silence first, not with words but with music. The next morning, Maya was preparing a puzzle in the garden room when she heard the notes float through the hall. Not clumsy, like Thomas's hesitant playing. These were simpler, halting, but intentional. A child's version of a lullaby, played from memory more than skill. She stepped into the hallway, drawn like a thread being pulled. The melody came from the music room. Lucas sat at the grand piano, his back straight, eyes focused. His fingers tapped the keys gently, as if afraid the sound might shatter. Maya didn't interrupt. He reached the end of the tune, a few soft notes that tapered off like breath on glass. Then he turned, surprised to see her there. "I remembered," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Maya stepped closer. "You did. It came in my sleep. The song." She nodded. "Sometimes the heart keeps singing even when the mouth forgets." Lucas scooted over on the bench. "Want to try with me?" Maya hesitated, then sat beside him. She hadn't played piano since she was a teenager, years before her world became all survival and scraped together rent. But here, beside this fragile boy with eyes full of need and courage, she found herself pressing a key, then another, and soon they were playing together, not well, not in rhythm, but in something better: trust. Thomas stood quietly in the doorway, listening. He didn't speak, didn't step forward, just watched his son and the woman who'd somehow made his house feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. That afternoon, Maya found herself in the library with Thomas. Lucas was with Martha in the kitchen, learning how to knead biscuit dough. Thomas paced as he spoke. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the letter, about what Julia wrote." Maya sat in the armchair, legs crossed, sipping mint tea. She was right. "I know. I didn't expect to be this far off track. Most men don't until something breaks," she said plainly. Thomas sighed. "When Julia died, I didn't know what to do with all the silence. I filled it with work, with meetings, with donations and conferences and press. Because grief without noise is terrifying," Maya said. He looked at her. "How do you do that? Just say things?" Maya tilted her head. "Because no one else will, especially not in houses like this." Thomas stopped pacing. "Lucas said something last night, after you left." Maya looked up. "He said you don't make him feel wrong." Thomas's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Maya exhaled through her nose. "That's a big feeling for a little body." Thomas sat across from her. "I'm afraid one day he'll grow up and hate me for the years I wasn't really here." Maya leaned forward. "Then give him reasons to remember the years you were." Outside, the rain had returned, soft and steady.